After starting the season 10-18 in what looked to be another year spent tanking, the Utah Jazz have won 12 of their last 14 games, including some really big wins against competitive teams. During that time, they've been pretty strong defensively, overwhelming opponents with the size and length that comes with running 2 or even 3 bigs on the floor at once. But the true catalyst behind their success has been some spectacular offense. Since December 21st, 14 games ago, they've scored an impressive 124 points every 100 possessions, good for third in the league over that stretch. Now, in the modern NBA, offensive production like that often comes with either an elite playmaker dominating the ball and running the show, or a big-time scorer who applies constant pressure until the defense completely collapses. Just think of some of this year's top offensive teams. The Pacers have Halliburton, who perfectly fits example number 1. The Celtics, Bucks, Thunder, and 76ers all have a top-tier scorer surrounded by a cast of complementary pieces, and the Clippers have a little bit of both. But you look at the Jazz, they don't have a single player who lands in the top 20 in points per game, or a player landing in the top 30 in assists per game, yet a combination of depth, perfect fit, and some masterful X's and O's has allowed them to score with the best of the best over the last month. Let's focus on that last point. If you turn on a Jazz game, there's always so much offensive action going on. This play starts with Sexton running off a pin down from Markkanen, while simultaneously on the weak side you've got Olynyk setting a back screen for Keontae George. Sexton starts to drive, drawing the attention of Cedi Osman, meaning that there's nobody in position to pick up George on a cut to the basket. Or how about this one, where Markkanen appears to be curling off of 2 screens towards the top of the key, only to cut through and clear that side of the floor so that Clarkson can flash out and cut into a flare screen from Kessler. Except, hang on, that's actually a decoy to distract the defense, because on the other side, Lowry's now running off of a pin down into open space on the perimeter for 3 points. Those corner down screens for Markkanen are a staple in their offense. The shooting is huge, but that isn't the only thing the defense has to worry about. If he's given any sort of space to attack the middle, he'll use his momentum to put it down on a drive where he's a big-time interior finisher. And to take away that space, you'd think that a switch can do the job, but the problem then becomes Lowry isolating against a mismatch in the middle of the floor, which is usually going to lead to some pretty good offense. There really isn't a right answer for how to defend these actions. And what ends up happening a lot of the time is a miscommunication like this, where his original defender wants to chase him while the second defender wants to switch. That gravitational pull leaves the screener wide open on a slip, and the result is an easy 2. It's the same thing when he's going towards the basket. This time, as they set up the action, Jeremy Sohan's gonna front the screen, so Lowry counters with a backdoor cut, which Vassell of course has to react to. Once again, 2 on Lowry leads to a high quality opportunity for a teammate. Very rarely will you see the defense do everything right. OG jumps in front of the screen, Schroeder sitting back to not give up a cut, and when that happens, the Jazz react by immediately setting up a second action. Now Lowry's gonna set a down screen for Chris Dunn to curl towards the ball, and with OG top blocking, that gives the big man an opportunity to slip down the lane for an open dunk. The takeaway here is that these corner screening actions create so many different options. They especially like running these 3-man actions. It looks like Lowry's gonna curl off a screen from Kessler himself, but he instead cuts off a back screen from Simone Fontecchio, who then immediately runs off the Kessler screen, and that's another guy who can knock down jumpers on the move. With 3 moving parts to cover, there are so many more opportunities for the defense to miscommunicate or just make simple mistakes. Here's another that starts with what looks to be Clarkson running off a couple screens towards the top, but he stops short and runs through. On the last play we looked at, that cued the second guy, this time Chris Dunn, to then run off a pin down, but now they're gonna flip it. Dunn setting a back screen for John Collins with nobody back to protect the rim from a lob. Another thing you'll see them do is set up those same corner pin downs, but instead using Lowry as the screener with one of their guards moving towards the ball. Notice how while that's happening, they're also running some decoy screening action on the weak side so that they can occupy the help and clear the lane for Sexton. Here's another example where Lowry's the one screening, and it's Jordan Clarkson who's running the route. Because Clarkson gets chased over the top, a second defender is forced to step in front of him to protect the paint, leaving Lowry open on a pop as he sets and fires 3 of his own. And I think these plays really speak to how many different ways Lowry can be utilized as an off-ball weapon. He can be the ball screener, where his outside shooting makes him a huge threat to pick and pop. And those pick and pops create a ton of space. Notice how when Clarkson turns the corner, Sohan would typically be the guy picking up the ball, but he's so worried about Lowry's shooting that he follows him to the top of the key, leaving the lane wide open for a drive and dunk. Here it is again. You've got Sexton coming off the screen as Lowry pops, and all he has to do is hesitate for a second while looking towards the top to send Jimmy Butler on a closeout, once again clearing the lane for an easy bucket. These ball screens can also serve as a decoy to set up something else. It looks like Lowry's getting into the two-man game with Dunn, only to slip right past and instead come off a flare screen on the opposite wing, which gets him enough space to comfortably catch and shoot. This one's real similar. It starts with the fake ball screen from Lowry, then another from Collins, who keeps moving to set a cross screen for Lowry, which again leaves him with enough room to pour in 3 points. Room for error when defending Lowry away from the ball isn't just minimal, it's non-existent due to the unique combination of size and shooting ability. Right now, he leads the entire NBA in 3-point attempts off the catch while capitalizing on more than 40% of them. That's ridiculous. And he's a legit 7-footer while doing it, so he's shooting over anyone. It's so hard to bother his shot that sometimes it'll demand a foul, and even that doesn't always get the job done. It takes near perfect defense to run him off the line. But like I said earlier, that just sets up another opportunity. The lane is wide open, so Lowry just sets up in the post and gets to a jump hook. Hang on, let's run that back because I want to focus on why the lane was so wide open for that post up. The key here is Kelly Olynyk. Over the last 2 seasons, he's hit more than 40% of his threes, so Jakob Poeltl is forced to step out and respect him. Because Poeltl's their primary rim protector, all of a sudden that paint becomes a lot more vulnerable. And this isn't some isolated incident. The way Olynyk opens up their offense can't possibly be overstated. In the same way you can open up this new year by cashing in on some bets. I've been told a number of times that people who like to bet on games will use my videos as a reference. And if you're looking for a place to take advantage, look no further than MyBookie. Right now, they're offering a huge bonus, a deposit match of 50%. That's right, as long as you deposit at least $50, they're adding half of that themselves, and all you have to do is sign up with my code. It's simple, just go to the MyBookie website and sign up with the promo code HoopVenue. You won't be able to find this deal anywhere else. Personally, I love the site because they have their very own custom prop builder, meaning that you can make your own stat lines and place the numbers exactly where you feel most comfortable. With MyBookie, you can bet anything, anytime, and from anywhere, so I'll leave a link in the description for anyone interested. And with that being said, let's take a look at Kelly Olynyk's impact on the Jazz offense. When he's on the floor, he's typically the one initiating. They'll get the ball to him in the middle before getting into their action, and he makes the right decision seemingly every single time. With that, he also has some skill as a scorer, So on a play like this where he's the one coming off a ball screen and the Pistons switch, he's able to attack the mismatch on a drive, getting all the way to the paint and drawing a couple free throws. By far his most valuable asset though is the passing ability. A lot of the set plays and screening actions I talked about start with the ball in his hands. Like this one where he holds it on the wing as Keontae George comes off a flare screen and he hits him perfectly in stride in the pocket for a real easy catch and shoot three. This time it's one of those corner pin downs, and notice how Hardaway is calling for a switch while Luka's attached to Clarkson. That gives Fontecchio an opportunity to slip, and Olynyk puts it right on the money. Here's another that starts with what looked to be the same action, except Bogdanovic is top locking with nobody protecting the baseline. So as soon as Kelly gets the ball up top, Fontecchio is going to cut back door, and just look at the placement. That's a ridiculous pass. Because he's so accurate, he'll exploit even the most minuscule soft spots in the defense. Lowry's gonna slip the screen, but with Sohan's body in the way, he's only able to get an arm down the lane. That's all Kelly needs to see though, again making a pinpoint pass that leads to a layup. In the event that the cut actually does get taken away, Kyrie does a great job of defending this one. Kelly's not going to force the issue or try to make a pass that isn't there. Instead, he starts moving towards the corner to set up a dribble handoff, but remember, I mentioned he is capable of scoring himself, so when he sees a lane to attack, he rejects the action and takes it to the rack. What ends up happening is you get this sort of Jokic-style offense. The movement, cutting, and screening action revolves around him in the middle of the floor, while he's simultaneously a threat to get into some two-man game. I think he's got especially good chemistry with Colin Sexton, and that's because Sexton's constantly hunting for opportunities to cut, and who better than Kelly to hit him in stride. This time you're going to see them set up with a more traditional ball screen look, but Sexton's explosive enough to reject the screen and apply pressure to the paint, which pulls the attention of Kelly's man, leaving him open on the pop with more than enough time to comfortably catch and shoot. Plays like that really highlight Sexton's value to this offense. He's the best on the team at getting to the rim and really does a lot of things you find in high-level slashers. A lot of players would choose to pick up their dribble right here. Vassell's on his right hip, Wemby's shutting off the middle, and he can either kick it to Olynyk on the wing or pull up for a midi. But here's what I'm talking about. He quickly goes behind his back to redirect his lane, and all of a sudden he's earned himself a trip to the line. Of course, it's never a bad thing to move the ball and get everyone involved, but there are possessions where the offense falls through, and you just need those guys who can break free and create something out of nothing. That's what Sexton's driving game gives them. His skill set also allows the team to run more ball screen action. He's not necessarily much of a pull-up shooter, but he's really good at attacking space. So if given room, he will turn the corner and find a lane to the basket. That ability to get to and convert at the rim, of course, puts the defense into rotation. And he's a good enough passer to capitalize by creating more open threes. So he's providing an on-ball presence that they really don't have much of. You'll find a lot of these same qualities in Jordan Clarkson. He's another guy who can consistently get into the defense and create his own shot, although he's more inclined to use the mid-range instead of going all the way. Still, that inside the arc shot creation applies pressure, which then frees up teammates, and he's come a long way as a passer, currently averaging a career high of more than 5 assists a game. I feel like everyone knows he's a bucket, but I actually don't think he gets enough credit for just how good he is in isolation. He's currently scoring 1.11 points per ISO, which is a pretty incredible mark, and it allows him to serve as a release valve for when their actions don't create any advantage to attack. The Spurs switch this flare without a problem, so Clarkson uses that space to take his man one-on-one. He beats him off the dribble, drawing help down low, and dumps it off to Kessler for a dunk. How important these on-ball creators can be to the offense really shows up in the team's numbers. Sexton's played about 750 minutes without Clarkson on the floor, and they've had a 118 offensive rating. Solid. And on the flip side, Clarkson's played about 725 minutes without Sexton, and they've marked a 115.5. Again, solid. But in about 300 minutes with neither on the court, the offense has collapsed, falling all the way to 108, well below the league's average. That's because they're the only two who can consistently get into the defense and force rotations, and without that sort of shot creation, it's really difficult to gain advantages. I will say, Keyonte George is getting closer and closer to being another one of those guys for them, and he's just a rookie. He hasn't yet figured out the slashing much, but the wrinkle that he offers is that he's the team's best off-the-dribble three-point shooter, adding another layer to their attack. It's a small sample, being his first year and all, but he's hit 40% of his pull-up threes. That's really impressive. And it means that he's another guy who can play that two-man game where if a big plays him in drop coverage, he's stepping into some efficient offense from behind the arc. That of course means he's able to create some advantages. Like here the Pistons switch the screen, which leaves Kelly Olynyk with a guard in the post. George doesn't have an angle to enter the ball, so Oche comes over to make the pass for him, and just like that you've got a layup. That's not to say George isn't a very skilled passer though. He's another guy who can initiate Utah's constant screening action, like this back screen for Oche to cut into open space and receive a perfectly placed lob. In addition to those guys, they also have Chris Dunn, who's a very limited scorer, but clearly the best passer of their guards. So when Kelly's not on the floor, he's typically the one setting the table, and he's capable of making those exact same reads. Although he won't break down defenders one-on-one like Sexton or Clarkson, with the space that Utah shooters create via movement, he can get into the defense and make plays like this lob to Kessler. There's actually something more important I want you to focus on from this possession though. Does anything look a little bit different than a typical offense? What I'm talking about is Kessler's positioning. He starts deep in the corner instead of in the dunker spot, and that's not because he's a shooter. The idea is to make Precious Achiuwa's rotation to the rim just a little bit longer because he can't touch the paint without getting a defensive 3-second call. Then Kessler's gonna time up his dive to the basket so that he can still space the floor vertically. This is another masterclass in X's and O's. Whenever Kessler's on the floor, they find a way to space him by throwing him in that weak side corner. Now when Clarkson and Lowry run a pick and pop that gives Clarkson a lane to the paint, Kessler's just filling out space along the baseline for some easy offense. Here's another one that starts with him in that weak side corner. This time it's a Sexton drive that draws the rim protection, and he actually attempts the shot. But Cade Cunningham completely missed his box out, so the big fella's got a free 2 points on the follow. That's the luxury of always having two bigs on the floor. There's always someone to crash, and that creates all sorts of problems. Over those last 14 games, they've been 6th in the NBA at over 16 second chance points every 75 possessions. Yet another layer to an already versatile offense. I started my breakdown talking about how they're unique in that they don't have just one driving force or traditional engine leading the charge, and I wanted to close by throwing some numbers at you to really highlight that point. Again, looking at the last 14 games, they don't have a single player touching the ball more than 60 times a game. There are players in the league averaging 90, even 100 touches. Some teams with two guys over 75, but the Jazz just have 6 guys who all land at about 50. That's what sharing the ball looks like. Some of that also has to do with their minutes. Lowry's averaging 31.5, Clarkson about 29, and no other player is over 26. They've essentially got a roster of guys playing sixth man minutes, 9 guys over 20, and 10 over 18. Talk about depth. According to Cleaning the Glass, they've got 6 different lineups that have played at least 100 possessions, and of those 6, 2 really stand out in terms of success. Their best lineup has been the 5 of Keontae George, Clarkson, Oche, Olynyk, and Kessler, outscoring opponents by nearly 12 points per 100. Their second best lineup has been Chris Dunn, Sexton, Simone, Lowry, and John Collins, with a net rating of about 5.5. How many teams in the NBA can put out 2 completely different lineups and get great results? I think that's a perfect place to bring this video home because it highlights why the Jazz have been so successful. It isn't just a one-man show. Sure, Lowry's an all-star, maybe even all-NBA caliber guy, but most of his time is spent away from the ball. It takes multiple ball handlers and good decision makers, multiple floor spacers, size, athleticism, and of course a perfect system that maximizes all of its parts. If all of those boxes are checked, you're left with the 2024 Utah Jazz, who have won 12 of their last 14 and aren't showing any signs of slowing down. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of the Jazz. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.